nightmare that seems to never end, that has gripped the depth and breadth of our society. It manifests itself in the kind of greed that has the terrible phenomenon of state capture as one of its symptoms. As journalists, we have the difficult responsibility of telling that story, of that story born out of hope in 1994, but over time has become a story of despair. We have been tasked with the heavy responsibility of explaining or trying to piece together the capture of the state. What we know is that for state capture to occur, a number of preconditions need to be in place. For example, political accountability needs to be weakened. Public institutions need to be shaken at their roots, if not entirely blown away. Society needs to be apathetic, and the media needs to be domesticated. To varying degrees, some of these factors were present when the worst invasive breed of individuals and groups spread their tentacles through various nodes of power. Some sang along as a wave of populism ignored principles and helped propel to sacred institutions a number of people we have since realized that some should never have been allowed to be the custodians of our most dear principles, values, and institutions. The role of the media in creating this fertile environment for the band of roads to grace our most sacrosanct institutions need an honest and thorough assessment. This is so that such heinous mistakes can never, ever happen again. Just like Madiba said, we should say never and never again. We know those who were part of the capture saw media as an important vehicle. Or how else do we explain the attempt to decimate the public broadcaster, the SABC, in the past few years? In his unprecedented apology to the public, the Sunday Times editor Bongani Sikoko says, "What is clear is that we committed mistakes and allowed ourselves to be manipulated by those with ulterior motives." The recent events have again suggested that the media industry has a lot to do if the dream of a meaningful democracy is to be truly realized. They have again reminded us that with that, the rights secured in Section 16 of our Constitution come with a very heavy responsibility, because our pens are mighty and can be used to help build or help destroy the foundation of a new South Africa born out of hope and yet to be told sacrifices. We need to take this moment to deeply introspect, take a hard look at ourselves as journalists, as the media, so that we can take steps to exercise the cancer of unethical conduct that has taken root in some parts of our being. We need to honestly answer why studies show that trust in the media is eroding. This was long before the recent apologies. The 2018 Elderman Barometer findings show that trust in South African media has fallen, with 61% believing that news corps were more concerned with attracting a big audience as opposed to reporting. And 59% believe news publications sacrifice accuracy to be the first to break the story. We all know the competition. While we try and find answers and ways to rebuild a trust relationship with the public we're supposed to be serving, they should not be despondent though, and neither should we, and neither should you be, our partners. The media industry is packed of throngs of ethical journalists who are driven by a deep commitment to journalism in the public interest and for public good. They are not driven by short-term material gains. They are imbued with a great sense of commitment to protect and to build a free and prosperous nation. Recently, many heroes and many heroines took great strides to unravel the corrupt scheme we often refer to as state capture. As soldiers of truth, they continue to expose the shenanigans of unethical leaders in many spheres, including government and business. Despite what our critics say, Steinhoff, the collusion of 2010, Bosasa, BBS, and the list goes on and on, It was the media that exposed them. The journalists have done so at great personal risk. Our work has earned us names. We've been called an oppositional force, Stratcom, Ascaris, and so the list goes on. Oh yeah, white monopoly capital speech. Bell Pottinger in service of the Guptas and politicians who sold their own country for personal enrichment waged a multi-million rand public relations war to discredit us, to silence us. How easy it is for some to forget. When they saw they were losing, they found other desperate means, including invading our homes. Some of the journalists who worked on the Gupta leaks were directly threatened or intimidated, and some of them needed bodyguards as they tried to connect the dots. But many of them did not want the stories to be told. They just continued with the work. Social media bots were unleashed on journalists to defame them, degrade them, and tarnish their image. Despite this war against them, which was physical, it was verbal, it was psychological, many of our journalists courageously continued working hard to expose the rot in pursuit of Gogo Dlamine's right to know, following in on the steps of the 1977 generation. Those who have been exposed for being beneficiaries of ill-gotten gains and playing a hand in deferring our people's dream for a just and prosperous South Africa are again looking to silence us. Weakened as we are, we must continue pushing back. When we met with President Cyril Ramaphosa in May, we asked him to do the right thing and throw the secrecy bill in the rubbish bin. It was passed by Parliament in 2013, and it needs only his signature, and then it will be signed into law. We remain positive, Mr. President, I hope you're watching, that he will still do the right thing as an important sign of his commitment to democracy, which cannot be sustained when draconian ideas and draft laws bubble around. If he has any doubt, he can send it to the Constitutional Court so we can get finality on the matter. But we still prefer that he just throws it into the rubbish bin. Black Wednesday is also an opportunity to reflect broadly on what role an organization like SANEF can play in tough times like these, when so many media institutions are really going through difficult times. News outlets may struggle to carry out their mandate and serve their social contract if they themselves are dealing with considerable strife. Our own research has shown that the industry is facing a number of threats. This includes complaints of inappropriate managerial interference in the sacrosanct editorial spaces, editors being fired both unprocedurally and unfairly or intimidated in order to tone down their outlets' reportage. We know journalists too have been punished or pushed out when they fought back. Editorial decisions are being taken in order to achieve particular commercial goals. Our editorial might being weakened by the rounds of retrenchment or newsrooms forced to let go those with the experience, the institutional memory, and agency to push back on any encroachment. And the reason they're given is that they're just too expensive. Today we also launched the 2018 Glass Ceiling Research. It's the biggest ever done by SANEF in collaboration with Gender Links. We're reflecting on the challenges facing women in South African media. We undertook this following up on a study that we had done. This is actually the third one. But we did it because we believe we are part of a South African society that needs transformation, so the media also needs to transform. And it doesn't always look so good. The study finds that there has been dramatic shifts in the race and gender composition of media houses since 2006, with black men now comprising half of top media positions. So, what it's telling us is that it's no longer just a white boys' club, as some of the respondents have said. The number of black women in top media management has increased fivefold, and that is good news. But it is still 20% lower than black men. But there is also another worry. The gender gap appears to be widening. Black men are moving up the ranks at a much faster pace than black women. And while there is an increase in women middle managers, there is a decline in skilled professionals. We should be disgusted that the pay gap between men and women is increasing instead of decreasing. So as an industry, we have to walk the talk on gender parity. It is also unacceptable that sexual harassment is a daily reality for women in the media, but it is still not prioritized. There are also new threats, including cyber misogyny, that could spiral out of control. In response to the identified lack of black women media managers, SANEF has prioritized the training and upskilling of women in our industry through projects like the Media Management Skills Program. Many of the women who have previously participated in the program have moved up into senior management positions. From the 2016 program, 4 graduates have been promoted to become editors, and I think we owe ourselves a round of applause. This is made possible by the funding from the FP&M CETA and the commitment of the partners, Frey Intermedia and Verts Journalism. And of course, not to mention the hard work of the women involved. SANEF has also played a central role in the recalculation of the NQF Level 5 Journalism Occupational Qualification under the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, QCTO. This has been in partnership with FPM CETA as the assessment quality partner. This qualification has been updated to meet the needs of modern newsrooms and equip journalists with the necessary practical skills in the workplace environments. Media law and ethics remain a critical component in grooming the next generation of truth warriors. The certificate targets people with a matric, but is suitable for graduates and others who are currently working in the newsroom. We are looking forward to the official rollout of the qualification. On this Black Wednesday anniversary, it is also an opportunity for corporate South Africa to also introspect. Are you playing your role in ensuring that journalism thrives? We thank our partners that have come to support us tonight to ensure that Madiba's values, that media freedom and democracy go hand in hand, live on. He firmly believed that journalists are the mirror through which we can see ourselves as others perceive us, warts, blemishes, and all, he said. Some of you might come under scrutiny as we do our work of reporting without fear or favor. But his advice, and I think all of you in the room should take it, as he had given it to his political party, his advice was that don't wilt under scrutiny, strive to do better. Be the corporate citizens that help realize the dream of a prosperous South Africa. We saw this week the News 24's 3 months investigation that revealed how the country's biggest banks, insurance companies, and car manufacturers have been caught advertising on fake news websites by buying programmatic advertising that lands on these dodgy websites. And we know the risk of fake news to a democracy. Just ask the Americans. We are approaching an election year at a delicate time. We are approaching an election next year at a delicate time in our country. Choose to strengthen our democracy with your pockets and not destroy it. As SANEF, we are also working with other media partners calling on the government to prioritize the progressive realization of the right to universal and free access to online information to enable citizens to exercise their basic right of information. We hope that the new Digital Industrial Revolution Commission announced by the President in his State of the Nation address in February will put the issues of universal access to the internet and basic level of free internet access high on the agenda. The key thing that that can and should be done to ensure progress in opening up information to the public is to make it easier for the public and the media to use PAIA to access information. A major improvement in the law will be to make provision for proactive disclosure of information, and also we need government websites and data to be zero-rated as the e-government policy envisages. As a country, we are in need of a new page. The late Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe said, "The wheel of progress revolves relentlessly, and all the nations of the world take their turn at the field glass of humanity." To paraphrase the rest of that quote, it's now journalism's turn. SANEF will not retreat, media will not compromise, we will not relent, journalism will not equivocate, and she will be heard, and South Africa will remember. Media freedom for SANEF is truly about South Africa. Thank you for enjoying the night with us.
I don't know about you, but I want to start ululating after that. Thank you so much, Mashlatsi. So my takeaways from that was courage, the word that describes so many of my peers across the country, and so many who I'm so proud to say sit on the council and ManCom of SANEF. They're truth warriors. They're here tonight. They're sharing your tables. They're hosting you tonight. Get to know them. Get to know what it's like to actually be on the field and bring you the news. Thabo Mbeki, President Thabo Mbeki said, when a free press is imperiled, muzzled, or banned altogether, every other freedom is limited to, and democracy itself is threatened. While we must recognize the danger of the mass media for spreading false and ugly stereotypes, the solution lies in an ever livelier debate in which racist ideas can be defeated. I think from the call that Mashlatsi has put out tonight, and to people listening to us via channel 404 on SABC, I think that we're in a good space as the media. And the only way to move is forward. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor is about to join us and talk to us about the role of business. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce him tonight. To Bonang Mohale, he is the Business Leadership South Africa Chief Executive Officer and held many, many roles at Shell, at Sanlam, has won numerous awards right from 1997. And I'm paraphrasing now because my entire screen has just gone clear. He has an illustrious business career, and in the last 25 years has won numerous awards. And for a man who's undergone so much stress, I believe he has one of the best skins I've seen. Mr. Bonang Mohale, welcome.
For liberal democracy to thrive, it needs a number of things. First of all, a constitutional democracy. It needs an independent civil society. It needs the rule of law, clear, fair, and enforced rules. But most importantly, it needs a free press. Eminence, excellencies, distinguished guests, good evening. Business Leadership South Africa is a friend of the media. It is precisely because of the Black Wednesday that we sit under these blue skies, sunshine, and we can look at ourselves as truly God's own people. It is precisely because of those dark days of that Wednesday that we look back today and say, where would we be had we known about this 10-year project of state capture, the Gupta emails? Had it not been for the free press, how could we look at ourselves as a people with great natural endowments, with the best constitution in the world, where our Freedom Charter's preamble says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. But it's the preamble to a constitution that starts by saying we the people, not the politicians. United in our diversity. And it guarantees, not promises, the three freedoms. The freedom of expression, the freedom of association, but most importantly and more profoundly, the freedom from hunger. Context is everything. So as we break bread together this evening, of course, let's wish the President a speedy and full recovery. But let's also rededicate ourselves to his call of Tumamina when he was quoting the late Brahu and Isaiah 57. Let us also rededicate ourselves to the task that is incomplete of a free people that wants to take their rightful place in the world community of nations. Because today, 24 years into a democracy, we still have a lot of work to do, but 80% of the things that we have done are truly unbelievable, remarkable, and indeed extraordinary. This is the time when we need to implore the leadership within. When a lot of us enjoy the titles on our business cards and the C-suite, to be reminded that leadership is being genuinely obsessed with the development of others. That it is about helping our people to see around the corners so that they can always ask the question, so what else is missing? It needs three things for it also to thrive. Some sort of a compelling vision. Even the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people perish. It also needs courage, the courage of your own conviction, irrespective of consequences. Imagine where we would be as a people had Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela and Reginald Oliver Tambo anticipating that they'll spend 27 glorious years of their best productive time in prison. Where would we be had they quivered and shivered and were afraid? It also requires a little bit of integrity. This is the one that is less sexy because we palate, highlight, and celebrate ill-gotten gains. How else do you explain the VBS? Where 2 trillion just walks by our own people, which demonstrates beyond any shadow of doubt that when Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela said, "I've fought white oppression and I will fight black oppression," that we thought that our leaders were incorrigible and therefore incorruptible. Had we listened to our brethren from the rest of the continent, would have believed them when they looked at us and say, "You're no different, you're just one African country. In time, your leaders will rob you blind as well." And we thought they were kidding. But leadership is also about creating movement. It's about influence. It's about consciously, purposefully, deliberately saying, I'm going to embark on judicial use of power. Because the best amongst us lead with the heart of a servant. When our politicians think that servant leadership, it's a leader with many servants. So it is precisely at this time when most women and black people are spectators of their own lived experiences that we look at the media to tell their stories so that they are not forgotten. When we wrestle with issues of gender equality, we're 24 years into democracy, we still pay women 73% of what we pay men for work of equal value. It is precisely at this time that these 4 lists, youngsters tell us, because they are heavily invested in the future, because they are going to spend most of their time there when some of us are closer to yesterday, that nothing about us, even if it is for us, without us. These young people that open our eyes to the importance and the intersectionality between gender, race, and class, and how we affirm people that don't look like us. So what then is the role of business in that environment? What is it that we can practically do? So in the past, it was easy for us to look at government and say, you must create a conducive environment in which business can thrive. It was easy for us to look at government and say, but you must give us regulatory certainty and policy stability. In the past, we looked at labor and said, you need to be slightly more flexible, you need to increase your productivity, and your strike should not go on for as long as it did in Marikana, because it wrecks the economy. So I believe what we are called upon to do as business today is not to fine-tune and tweak 1,001 little things of insignificance. Because once you have tasted significance, importance does no longer matter. To look for 4 big things that are impactful, that can move the dial, that can improve the quality of lives of the majority of our people, because the intent is to lift the bottom half by the scruff of their neck and plunge them into the middle class. Because if we're to succeed in doing that, we'll be the ones that sleep better at night. I believe that as business, if we were to pay particular attention maybe to 6 big burning platform issues, and without any degree of granularity so that I don't give you indigestion, let me proffer 1 or 2 of them. The first is land, the second is transformation, the third is this fiscal crisis we are confronted with, the fourth is growth, the fifth is jobs, the last one is education. I might not reach all of them, but let me unpack 1 or 2 of them. You see, land was not put on the table by business or by this ANC-led government. It was put by the extreme left. Now that it's been put on the table, we dare not ignore it. I think as business, we need to be explicit that we support land expropriation without compensation. Because it will happen with or without us. But we support it because that's the wrong conversation to have. The right conversation is land reform. And in land reform, there are 3 components. The first is land restitution. I'm not English, but restitution to me conjures images of restoring the land to their original owners. because we know that it was forcefully taken from African people. Not only is land central to the struggle of African people, but it is absolutely seminal to their continuance and success and to their economic expression. The second is land redistribution, because it's not sustainable that you squash 90% of the population into 13% of the land that is the most barren, with zero mineral resources, because the apartheid era government planned for it to be so. The last one is the one that's slightly more interesting, because it talks to land development. Isn't it sad that 24 years into democracy, we haven't even completed a land audit? And yet, it is clearly articulated in the 1955 clipped down Freedom Charter in Article 6, and our forebears did not use vile language. Listen to the language that they use. They say, and land shall be shared amongst those who work it. I mean, what could be more inclusive than that? But this is the one that talks to Section 25 of the Constitution, that talks about property rights, and in particular about security of tenure. Article 3A on the 6th line says, when conditions of fair and equitable have been adequately fulfilled, compensation can be down to zero. So therefore, land expropriation without compensation is adequately catered for and covered in our Constitution. Why have we done nothing for the last 24 years? I think it's because our ANC-led government was sleeping at the wheel. They were not paying attention to this. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's first 400 MPs, the land ministry had the smallest budget, the least resources. 24 years later, it still does not have a permanent land judge. That judge is temporary. It has a budget smaller than Lindiwe Zulu's small and medium enterprises ministry. So what we witness, it's not an inadequacy of policy or legislation, but a failure of doing, of execution. It was General George Patton who said, great wars are won by good execution, not great plans, because good execution will save even a mediocre plan. So when we went with the President Matamela, Cyril Ramaphosa, it's like we died and woke up in heaven on the 19th of December 2017 when we learned that he's the new president of the ANC. Close your eyes for a moment and think what it could have been like had the other party won. Kruger says the consequences would be too ghastly to contemplate. So in his first forays, we went with him to this non-deal investor roadshow, 3 days in London, 1 day in Boston, the last 2 in New York. We then accompanied him to Toronto. For the first time in 7 years, we were invited to the G7 because Russia was kicked out. We've just come back from the Forum on China and Africa conference in Beijing with 53 heads of state except just Swaziland. And we've just seen the 8 major companies in Japan called the Kairitsu that control 99.8% of that economy. So the rating agencies, when they look at a country like us, they're probably looking at only 4 things. One is our growth prospects. The second is our fiscal strength. The third is our institutional strength and our susceptibility to risk. So what are the things then that needs to be fixed? You saw the 6 things I didn't unpack. I unpacked only land. Not transformation, not the fiscal crisis, not even education. I will end on education in 2 minutes. But at a high level, we welcome President Cyril Ramaphosa's choice of the Ministry of Finance, a safe pair of hands, in Minister Tito Mboweni, tried and tested. So in the medium-term budget policy statement, our expectation to him, and we've already reached out, is at a high level. Maybe if you could help us root out and defeat state capture, it might help, because it will save us at least 100 billion South African rands a year that gets siphoned off just to these two families, one of them being an illegal immigrant Indian family. The second is to reduce our debt. Debt to GDP ratio, it's a bit high. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's was 24. During Thabo Mbeki's days, it never exceeded 30. We are now at 57% debt to GDP ratio, excluding the guarantees to state-owned enterprises. There's more than 700 of these state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies. DPE only looks after 6+1. The third is to fix our state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, because we know that not only is our government bloated, Mandela's cabinet was 20, Thabo's was 23. This past regime, I like English, it is a regime, had 37. Our SOE is a third too big. And if we take Eskom for an example, 48,000 employees, 15,000 too many. The only utility in the world that still does generation, transmission, and distribution all in one, when in most parts of the world, these probably 3 separate companies, even listed separately. The 4th largest utility, and we chose to do the biggest coal-fired power stations built in the world, Medupi, Kusile, and Ingula. So when you look at the math, you can see that it doesn't add up. To pay this debt per annum 57 billion, to service only the interest about 30, you add the 2, that's 90 billion. The last financial year they've just released, cash generated from operations, 43 billion. So you see that they have to borrow just to service interest. The last 2, they said we need to exercise fiscal prudence and consolidation. When you're in a fiscal crisis, you can't be extravagant as we have been. We need to tighten our belts a little bit. The last one, they said you need to have a bit of a positive narrative. And I'm going to end on this one. Positive narrative, because South Africans are our own worst enemies. 2016, the president of Colombia won the Nobel Peace Prize because Colombia changed the narrative. They stopped telling the world about how many brains they've blown off the drug lords' heads and started talking to the world about the systems and processes they're putting in place to work at lasting peace with FARC, also known as FARC. So why does education matter? Because I said I'll end on this one. Not only because Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela told us that is the surest way of transcending social classes. Not because you can be born in the informal settlements of Alexander and in 24, 25 years, just across the bridge, in the richest square mile in the continent, be able to afford a house in the leafy suburbs of Bryanston. But because we are the only African country that became free from colonialism, and we didn't improve the quality of our education. So Africa, 1.2 billion people, 54 countries, speak 2,000 languages, continental GDP of $2.65 trillion. Nigeria, 170 odd million people, 420, South Africa, 350 billion US dollars. 1957's Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, 10 years later, 80% literacy rate. Even Gabriel Robert Mugabe, in spite of the challenges as we speak today, 94% literacy rate in Zimbabwe. South Africa is the only one that became free and found apartheid education here, and we buried it to the ground, where now 30% is an acceptable pass. Education matters. That's why, as business, we're going to pay particular attention to this, because when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gains access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. You've been extremely generous with your time. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a bigger round of applause for our guest of honor, Bonang Mohale, CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. Unlike my fall power about 20 minutes ago, he delivered an address without paper, without a tablet. He quoted from the Constitution and the Bible. He did some math. He talked about 5 different subjects, all factually correct. I'd like to use my next 280 characters to correct one small Inyana fact, because, you know, fake news must fall. It's not 2 trillion rand in the great VBS heist. It's 1.9 billion.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So this was a really fantastic orator. I was really gripped by every word you say. I go to temple to meditate, but today I found myself in church. So thank you so much, Mr. Mohale. That was a fantastic speech. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, from that we go to dinner, and our program will resume in about 30 minutes. Thank you.